Hey, good morning, Ryan. Thank you so much for taking time and talking to me this morning. How have you been?
I've been great. Thanks for having me, Aaron.
Absolutely. Ryan, let's just get started by just having you do a quick intro. Like, what do you do? Which company do you represent? Like, what's the kind of work that you've done doing?
Yeah, I run demand gen for a company called Aptitude 8. We are an elite HubSpot solutions partner. We're not your typical HubSpot partner, which is mostly marketing agencies. We focus specifically on RevOps and marketing ops within the HubSpot space. So no creative, nothing like that. But we are highly technical and very focused on that ops.
Awesome. I just wanted to start with RevOps. I think it's a recently coined name, and then not too many people actually understand, right? And I like was reading, and it was actually coined to drive that sales alignment, which is what like we talk a lot in ABM, right? So what's your definition of RevOps, right? And what are the process involved? So can you just help us to demystify the term, and then so it becomes a popular sort of like acronym?
Yeah, I only pretty recently, before joining Aptitude 8, heard the term RevOps.
Hmm.
Uh, I had heard sales operations for years and had started to learn more about marketing operations. But I see RevOps as kind of the overarching umbrella that
Hmm.
covers marketing ops, sales ops, and even customer success ops.
Hmm. Hmm. Okay. Yeah, I think I was just doing this research, right? Apparently, it was coined in 2016, so it's fairly new, right? And then I think there's a reason why we've not heard about it, right? Uh, So, what do you think is the difference, right, between a sales operations, right, marketing operations, and combining this into RevOps? Are there specific set of activities that sort of goes through that independently does not go through when you like refer to sales op, right? We'll come to HubSpot also, and I think that's where you specialize in. So I just wanted to just get a view on what exactly do you as part of RevOps, anything specific at all?
Yeah, I think it comes down to alignment.
Hmm.
At previous companies, I've seen like sales teams own sales ops. There's somebody that reports up the sales structure. Marketing teams own marketing ops, but those people they're not necessarily aligned. They're
Hmm.
aligned with the teams they support,
Hmm.
but not with each other. And I think that's a really critical piece that RevOps brings, is that it forces some alignment between your operations teams
Hmm.
in a way that if you have like more siloed marketing and sales, it doesn't happen.
Right. And you guys implement RevOps like using the HubSpot platform, right? So, and I think that's very specialized on. So, can you talk about the process? Let's say there is a customer who wants to do it, like if there is some kind of a qualification that they go through before you start working with them. So, just talk us through that process, right? So, the reason I'm talking about this particular activity is, I think, what we are eventually going to talk a lot about is how do you do ABM, right, using HubSpot as a platform, right? Before that, I just wanted to cover this, right? So, what's the process in terms of setup, right? What are the different roles that you typically have working on HubSpot, doing RevOps activities?
Yeah, typically, in order to kind of, I guess, qualify for needing RevOps support, you typically have a pretty built out marketing and or sales team already.
Hmm.
Um, and what happens when, as you build out your go to market teams, is you get a lot of people going into your CRM, inputting data, updating things, creating workflows, and eventually you get kind of like a spaghetti mess that
That's right.
there are automations happening and you just don't know really what's causing them or how they're interacting. Um, some of them are duplicative or cancel each other out. Uh, and that's typically where at that point when you start to get unmanageable,
Hmm.
in terms of your CRM is when you need to bring in marketing ops or RevOps to help really straighten out, make sure that there's process in place that those teams are following in order to preserve data hygiene. Uh, it also helps like optimize conversion rates, all kinds of behind the scenes benefits to having a really clean CRM, a plan for automation and for integrations and knowing where your data is going and what it's doing.
So how do you enforce this, right? So like much advanced CRM, like let's say Salesforce or other platforms, right? So I think the governance part of it is not something that like HubSpot provides a lot of tools, at least from my understanding, from the limited use that I've, right? So how do you enforce this data quality, hygiene, right? So is there some kind of layering that you can build, or how does it all work?
Well, as any salesperson that has ever used Salesforce will tell you, it's very frustrating to go in and try and update a deal and be hit by a bunch of validation rules saying you need to fill out all of these things in this way. And what I've witnessed when that happens is a lot of times salespeople will just throw in bad data into
Hmm.
required fields or use a catch all field like notes in order to just put in all of the data that they either don't have a place for or isn't available as a property.
Hmm.
So the way HubSpot, I think you can treat your sales team with a little more dignity and respect. And what I always like to do is keep it simple.
Yeah.
I want to talk to those team members. I want to see how they work, what processes they're already using, and then see if I can build something that is simple enough that they can integrate it into their processes, but it still allows us to capture accurate data, not too many like open text fields.
Hmm.
Um, so I'm trying not to disrupt their workflow
Right.
while also preserving data hygiene.
How do you do that? So you still have to have validations. I think there's another problem with custom fields, right? As soon as you have administrative rights, you start like creating a bunch of these custom fields, and then nobody knows what exactly it's created for. And then I think the way it's configured and things like that, right? So you start creating this data silos, right? So the same or the multiple fields having different or the same information, right, is like sort
Mhm.
of like split between two different fields and things like that. So how do you control all of that? And I think more importantly, so how do you get started? Do you run as some sort of a template based on a stage, the stage of a company, the kind of let's say the processes that they might be using, which may not be optimized already, right? So do you start clean slate, or do you sort of like build upon what they already have? How do you guys approach this?
I think most of the customers that we're working with are on the higher side of mid market or the low side of enterprise. So that in that case, they are either newly implementing the CRM
Hmm.
or they've had it for years and there's a ton of stuff already built in it.
Right.
Um, when they're newly implementing, they're usually migrating from something else.
That's
So
right.
even though it's a new HubSpot instance, they already have a bunch of processes that need to
Hmm.
be recreated.
Hmm.
So I don't think in that like mid market to enterprise tier of customer that there's any sort of example of like a cookie cutter, out of the box implementation.
Hmm.
HubSpot really allows you just in the last couple of years, they've added a bunch of extensibility features like custom objects,
Hmm.
custom coded actions and workflows, that kind of thing,
Hmm.
that allow you to really extend HubSpot in terms of its data model, in terms of use cases. Um, so anytime we're doing an implementation, it's not a template. It is customized for that company's
Hmm.
business needs.
Got it. Okay. Let's talk a little bit on ABM, right? So, what has been your experience with ABMs? I think we talk quite a bit on ABMs. What has been your experience? And then let's just switch to how can somebody get started with their ABM programs, right? With HubSpot. I think in most cases, right, especially in my experience, right, so they have some CRM, there's some marketing automations that's already set up in HubSpot, right, and then they're not ready, right, to go into a pure play ABM platforms, right, and I think there are a lot of such customers, and I think it's going to be really useful. So just talk about both these questions, right? So your own experience with ABM, and then how have you seen HubSpot being used for ABM programs?
Yeah, my experience with ABM started actually before I really knew of that as a term.
Hmm.
Once I heard about ABM, I was like, oh, I've been doing this, which is always a good realization.
Yeah, yeah.
But I was working for a fintech company. We were selling technology for a certain type of financial advisor that works with
Hmm.
alternative investments. And that was really nice and really lent itself to ABM because with SEC filings, we were
Hmm.
able to just like download a list of the companies uh, that utilize these sorts of investments.
Okay.
So that really lent itself to an ABM approach. Like I said, I didn't know that we were doing ABM at the time,
Hmm.
but we were doing kind of a scrappy, the like Mason Cosby scrappy ABM playbook of like identifying those target accounts, tagging them in HubSpot as target accounts, and then using LinkedIn ads pretty extensively because LinkedIn, I think more so than Google or Facebook or other advertising options, has really really accurate employment data. So
Yeah.
you're when people get a new job, they update LinkedIn. You know that you're hitting the right people, the right job titles, the right companies when you're advertising through LinkedIn. So that combination of LinkedIn ads and HubSpot was just a really low budget, easy way for us to do ABM without buying super expensive software like a
Hmm.
6 Sense or a Terminus.
Hmm.
I did end up using Terminus at another company later on. I implemented an ABM program, and the it was a little bit more difficult for us to identify the types of companies that would be using our technology. So we had to get kind of creative with um, a few different ways. We were using intent data. We were using uh, it was in the health industry. So again, we were using like some regulatory information, and that helped us identify those companies. And we used Terminus to put out display ads because it it was an industry that was a little bit less likely to be active on LinkedIn.
LinkedIn. Okay. Okay. And did you have any kind of integration with HubSpot in that particular project?
When I was using Terminus, I was working in a company that used HubSpot and Salesforce. So we were
Hmm.
integrating everything through Salesforce.
Hmm.
Um, that's actually a big part of the reason why we chose Terminus is
Hmm.
because they had a better Salesforce integration than the other ABM platforms that we were looking at. And we really wanted that data to be able to get into Salesforce, and then we could send it to HubSpot and other platforms through those integrations.
Hmm. What are this data and how have you used, if you recall? I'm sure it's been a while, but as much as you can remember, right? Like I'm curious to know what is the workflow that your data flow that you have set up, right, between these three systems, right? So where does it start, where does it end, and who does what?
A lot of the stuff we were looking at was either intent data, where we could sync the topics that they were searching across platforms, or the latest website visit, number of website visits, just all that anonymous web visit data, and tying that to a company.
And that was
Um,
in Terminus, is it? Was it
yeah,
in Terminus? Okay, that was in
that
Terminus.
sank from Terminus into Salesforce, and then
Right.
we put that data into HubSpot and used it for things like account scoring, um, and to trigger certain automations.
Got it. Okay, that makes sense. And so let's say somebody don't have access to Terminus or a platform like ours, then how can they still do their ABM, or at least get started with their ABM, right? So just through HubSpot, like what are the different, let's say, capability that HubSpot has, right? How does it start? Like, so somebody who's, let's say, has using HubSpot as a CRM, maybe doing some like bulk emailing, things like that, right? And I've seen a lot of inquiries, right, for starting to ABM who are at that particular stage. So, right, so before they start sort of like investing on tech platforms, right? And I think you rightly said, right? So this crappy ABM is what they should start with, right? So how can they start use HubSpot to do scrappy ABM?
I think the first step with any ABM process is just identifying your target accounts, and there's some things that HubSpot provides that can make that a little bit easier. So they just out of the box they have something called HubSpot Insights, which will populate any company record with a bunch of information, company size, estimated annual revenue. There's even a property for the technologies that they use.
Hmm.
So that's something that at Aptitude 8 we use pretty extensively because we are looking for companies that either use HubSpot or use a competitor to HubSpot and might be interested in switching.
Hmm.
There's also some additional technologies that we might look at to say like, oh, this company uses high touch. That means that they're at a level of sophistication that we would probably be interested. So using HubSpot Insights, you can just totally out of the box before you pay for something like Zoom Info or Clearbit. Um, you can use some firmographic data to really narrow down the list of companies that you're looking at. So that's the first step. You just got to identify target accounts, and I would say like a general rule of thumb is look at the number of sales reps you have and multiply that by 5 or 10, and that's how many target accounts, the tier one target accounts, you should identify. Once you have your list of target accounts, you can start using HubSpot, either automations or their active lists to segment them by behavior they're doing. You can use, there are lead score properties that are not specific to contacts. You can actually create them on the account level, so you can score accounts.
Right.
Um, you can use calculated properties to roll up data from all of the contacts at an account onto the account record. And when you use all of those things in combination, you can really segment your target list in really interesting ways so that you can get more specific with your messaging. And then I think the third thing, and this is like the powerhouse one that really differentiates HubSpot from other platforms, is you can create landing pages with dynamic content so that they, with pretty low effort, um, you can make them appear as if they are custom built for every single client. So to do that, you might create a property on a company record to store the logo of that company.
Mm-hmm.
And then using that property, you can dynamically insert it into an email or a landing page. And then it looks like it is specifically designed for that company. And you are using some of the information that you know from segmenting uh, your companies in order to, maybe just create a handful of really specific landing pages or email campaigns and then dynamically inserting information about the company so that it appears really customized.
Got it. How do you plug in ads as a channel, right? So without like using another like an ABM platform, right? So how do you integrate channels? Yeah, specifically advertising, and then we'll also talk about social media and other channels.
Yeah, HubSpot makes that super easy. There's an advertising add-on. It might be native to the Marketing Hub, but at one point at least it was an add-on. But that allows you to pull some of those segmented lists that I was talking about before directly into ad platforms like LinkedIn, Google, or Facebook. So you're not having that the to manually upload a list of companies. It'll actually dynamically update as data in your CRM updates.
Hmm.
So, for example, if you wanted to show a series of ads to companies that have an active deal in your pipeline, if you are doing it without HubSpot and your ad platform integrated, then what you're having to do is once a month, you're exporting a list of all of your deals and you're uploading that list into your ad platform. It's highly manual. It's not dynamic at all. If someone drops out on the second of the month, then you're still serving ads to them until you do your next upload. When you go through the HubSpot ads platform to integrate with LinkedIn, for example, you can just have that list appear in your LinkedIn ads manager as an audience, and it will dynamically update every time a deal closes or changes information. If a new deal comes in, they'll be added to it. It's a really simple way for people to dip their foot into ABM advertising without paying for like an enormous ABM platform that can
Mm,
cost you, tens of thousands of dollars at least.
sure. And how do you plug in something like an intent, right? Are there live integrations, or you just do export, import, or how does it work?
Yeah, there's HubSpot has so many integrations. I know Bombora is a really popular one that has an integration. Um, I like to think about intent. It I found that things like Bombora that uh, use data based on searching and outside of your own website
Right.
data to be kind of hit and miss. Sometimes it's really good, but sometimes it surfaces inaccurate things. Plus, you never know. Like it could be one person at a company searching something, and they may be outside of the your ICP in terms of like job titles.
Yep.
They're not a decision maker. So those are kind of tough. I do think that the way that HubSpot allows you to put a tracking code on your website and then see how individual contacts, what pages they're looking at, that kind of thing, you can really easily surface which contacts are looking at high intent content on your website. You can look at ad interactions on the contact record. You can sync all of that stuff, roll it up into the company record. So I really like to think about intent more in terms of first party data,
First
where
party.
you're
Right.
seeing
Right. Yeah.
are
I
they
think
going
third
to our
party.
product pages?
Right. I think third party intent is useful for like a first level segmentation, right, to do some experiments. And I think more reliable intent is around what you can make out through website visits, content consumption, and then ad interactions and all of that. I agree. Is there a way to plug in any organic social media interactions, right, through HubSpot, so that like bunch of things that you need to do when you're doing ABM, right? It's not ads, it's not emailing, right? It's not even cold calling, right? When you have to get into these, especially social, right? So it's becoming really popular, and people are able to do it very successfully, right? So how do you not lose out on those interactions? How do you make use of that data in your own ABM programs, and as well as the ones that you do for your customers or clients?
Yeah. A tool that I've just started using is something called HubLead,
Hmm.
um, and that's an app that integrates LinkedIn data into HubSpot and vice versa. So if I go to a LinkedIn company page, there will be a button on that page that HubLead puts in there that says see decision makers. And when you
Hmm.
click on that, it'll show you a list of the decision makers and you can add them to your CRM. It's very similar to the functionality that like a sales navigator uh, would give you, but
Hmm.
it is specific to HubSpot. So it shows you who's in your CRM. If I go to the like conversations view, the messages in LinkedIn, I can sync my conversations directly to that contact record, and they show up in the contact record as LinkedIn messages back and forth. So that's something we just introduced that into our sales team. So they are now syncing their conversations, and they can actually add contacts from LinkedIn directly into HubSpot with just the push of a button.
It's interesting. And how do you make use of this data? Do you create some automations or anything like that, or you use it for lead scoring? How do you make use of this data?
You definitely could. I think that, especially if you're, we've been talking about ABM, account based marketing, but if you're thinking about it more as like account based engagement, where it
Sure.
is truly marketing and sales together, that's when it becomes really useful. So you can look at reporting and just look at like activity levels filtered by target account. Typically, in a more tactical manner, what we're doing is if a member of our sales team goes to the contact record and they see someone else on our team has already had a LinkedIn conversation with
Hmm.
someone.
Hmm.
Um, for example, I am not on our sales team, but I, just because I'm very active on LinkedIn,
Right.
will get a lot of messages saying, hey, can you help me out with this specific problem? I can then just sync that to the company record or the contact record in HubSpot, and if our sales team is then working that company later and they see that, they can reach out to me and say, hey, can you do a warm introduction? Instead of that information being totally siloed in LinkedIn, where they would have no idea that I've ever had a conversation with them.
Hmm. Hmm. So that's very interesting. I'm going to check this tool out. Uh, so in the activity view, so they see you as somebody who's connected to the particular account. Is that how they would see it?
They would see it would just be if it was a message exchange between us
Hmm. So
that
you
that I've
should
synced
have
into HubSpot.
interacted with them before, not
Yeah.
necessarily.
So I if I had a conversation with them and then there's a little button I can push to sync the conversation to HubSpot, then that puts it into HubSpot on the contact record as an activity, the same way that
I got
like
it. Okay.
them replying to an email
Hmm.
would show up.
Okay. Okay. So based on that, and if they see an opportunity to go and then connect with them, so they and how does the intros work? So do you? I'm assuming you have to go to LinkedIn and then do that, isn't it? Connecting both of them through an email or like messaging or anything like that. So there's no automation around that, right? You can't do this with an email. Sorry, what is that tool called? Hubmail, is it?
Hub HubLead.
HubLead. Okay, so you have to do that process manually, like
Yeah, that once a salesperson reaches out to me and says, "Hey, do
connecting.
you know this person? Have I saw your conversation with them." Then that's a manual process where I would probably shoot them a message on LinkedIn or an email if I have their email, and just say, "Hey, I'd like to introduce you to David on our sales team," and then they could take the relationship from there.
Got it. Right. And just sticking with ABM, right? So what are some common mistakes, right? So you've done ABM before using platform as well as, right? So like the scrappy ABM that we talked about, right? I think Mason talks about like podcasts as one of the primary channel. So I don't know if there are any tools that exist that can also be like integrated, right? So take a lot of insights into that, right? So maybe there is a tool that somebody's building, right? But like, what are some common mistakes? What are some advices that you would give to practitioners, especially who are getting started, right? Where they just start with like HubSpot, mature it, and then possibly just take it to platforms and do like a scaled ABM.
I think if you're just starting out, don't jump straight into buying a big ABM tool. A lot of times that's what will happen. A CEO or a CRO will say, "We're going to do ABM now. Find us a platform to use." And that's not the way to approach it. It's you really want technology to make your processes more efficient, not to define your processes. So when you're first getting started, like really do a DIY version of it where you are figuring out your target account list. You are, as we talked about before, running ads through LinkedIn based on audiences you created in HubSpot. Do it low budget. And then if that's working for you and not just for marketing, it's working for sales, it's creating qualified deals. Sales is on board with the strategy and is doing account based reporting. I think metrics are really important. So instead of like a a revenue goal, you might also layer in a revenue goal at target accounts where additional deals that are outside of a target account are nice. You know, that's still money. But if you're truly taking an account based approach, you should be looking at penetration into your target accounts as the primary goal. So if you do it for a little bit in this DIY version and you're seeing an uptick in that penetration, sales is happy with the leads that marketing is bringing in, that's when you want to start thinking, okay, how can we scale this with an ABM platform or some other type of tool?
How does your ABM dashboard look, right? So what are the different reports, analytics that you track, right? So I think you covered a couple of it, but like, what would be a fully built dashboard, right? So on HubSpot, right, and making sure that you're tracking everything that you wanted to possibly track.
I think it looks just like probably your standard, lead or MQL based marketing dashboard. Same with sales, like a typical sales pipeline dashboard. Um, the only difference is you're filtering by target accounts. Instead of looking at how many MQLs have you created, it's how many MQLs have you created at target accounts. And you might even have a um, almost like a leaderboard type report where you're showing the a list of your target accounts, and then next to it, how many MQLs have we created, how many deals have we created, uh, so that you're truly like looking at, okay, specifically this is our number one target account. How are we doing there? What are our typical marketing and sales metrics, but specific to that single company? And I think that's an adjustment that people have to kind of get used to, not thinking about uh, contact based metrics where you're looking at a total number of MQLs and really thinking about it on an account level. Um,
So would that be
how
a rolled up kind of a metric? So what you would have been typically tracking at a lead level, so you roll it up to account. Is that how you approach, or do you come up with a different formula?
it could be, it could just be a filter on it, depending on what you're looking at. I think there are stats that you can roll up, such as one that I use pretty frequently was like website visits by account, where I was taking every contact at a target account and then rolling that up and seeing, okay, how many total web visits did this company have from contacts that we know about. Um, So things like that. Web visits is probably a bad example, but you get the idea. Just like any stat that you're looking at an individual contact level, you can look at an account level.
Hmm. And how do you track progression? For example, are there like specific reports that you use, or how do you like is there a trend graph, or like I'm just trying to visualize and then see like how do you manage that, right? So you wanted to make sure that you have like deeper insights, especially on your target accounts, especially the one-to-one kind of an account, right? So your tier one accounts.
Yeah,
What are the
I
best ways
was
to?
the primary way that I was thinking about it was account stages. So this is similar to like a life cycle stage for a contact, but at
Hmm.
an account level. So we were thinking about it in terms of like at the very top, you have accounts that have no interaction with you. They may or may not know that you even exist. And then the next stage below that is are one or more contacts from that account uh, visiting our website. And then stage below that, are one or more contacts at the account, have they become an MQL? Has sales reached out to them? Do they have an opportunity? Are they a customer? So you're trying to kind of move accounts through that funnel, and you can do that in a way where you can see kind of like the width of the bar. And when you start, the fattest bar is gonna be at the top, and you want to see that slowly shift over time so that eventually, the very top one is maybe the second highest bar, and then your second stage is higher. That means that you are moving accounts gradually through that funnel. While at the same time, I think as you're creating the criteria that go into these stages, you need to think about time bounds. So if you have, say stage two is one contact has visited the website. Well, if they've ever visited the website, that's not super helpful because they could have visited it 5 years ago.
That's right.
That person may not be at that job anymore. Nobody may know about you. So you want to do it in terms of, the last quarter, the last 6 months, last 30 days, whatever makes sense for that metric. And then that way, you're not only having people move down the funnel, but they can actually regress back up if they stop having interactions with you. If you have a deal with them and then that deal becomes closed lost, then they're going to bump back up to the previous level. If you have no MQLs at that company in the last 6 months, then they probably don't deserve to be at that MQL stage. So you're really seeing these bars shift over time, and ideally you want everything to be weighted down at the bottom, but realistically when you're starting, it's very top heavy.
Sure. And all of this are managed through different filters, is it? Custom fields or other existing fields, right? So they control, right? Or do you write some kind of a code script to manage that? How does it work?
You can do this totally no code. You can create custom lifecycle stage properties. If you're in HubSpot, you can create custom reports, funnel reports. You could have like a deal pipeline. If you're using custom object for target accounts to kind of separate it out from your typical company records, then you can create a pipeline for a custom object. So
Got it.
there's a variety of different ways that you can look at this.
How do you plug in an inbound? So let's say there's an account that you've not identified as a target account, but later they come inbound, or right?
Hmm.
This is assuming your inbound engine is working, right? So how do you sort of bring them? Where do you stack them, and then how do you deal with those accounts? Which stage does it
Um,
go through?
yeah, I think it depends on how your inbound is set up. If you are using, lead generation forms where you're, uh, you know, having people fill in an email address for an ebook, then they may or may not really enter that funnel beyond just like they've been to the website. Um, if you're using more of a demand gen strategy where pretty much the only form that you have is a high intent, contact us or request a demo, then they could jump straight into MQL opportunity, whatever it is that where that high intent form fits in.
So potentially you can have demand gen programs, right, still being executed through HubSpot, and also have another pipeline basically to nurture your target accounts, right? Is that the typical setup that you have?
I think with demand gen, you can make demand gen be account based. I think account based marketing is something that you can just layer on top of other marketing strategies. You can have account based marketing that incorporates inbound. You can have it that incorporates demand gen. You can have ABM that incorporates cold emailing and outreach. It's more about how you're thinking about metrics and how you're targeting your marketing.
Hmm. I just wanted to quickly check on the CMS part of the HubSpot offering, right? So does that help? Does that scale for an ABM way of, let's say, demand gen or pipeline acceleration or even customer marketing, right? So do you feel or do you know that if it's a good fit, CMS as a platform from HubSpot, right? So does it scale well?
I think HubSpot scales incredibly well.
Hmm.
You've obviously got the different tiers. Uh, there are free offerings for every hub, starter, professional, all the way up to enterprise. And the benefit of that is as your company grows, you can upgrade it. If you have a really tough year, we're obviously in a questionable economic climate right now.
Hmm.
You can scale it back. You can drop it back down a tier if you need to free up some funds for other things. You got to be careful with that because any features that you're losing there, you need to make sure the processes that
Don't
you
get
have in
affected.
place are redesigned. Um, so I think it does scale incredibly well. HubSpot, as I mentioned before, has also added a ton of extensibility features.
Hmm.
So custom objects was a huge one. Operations Hub allows you to do a lot more with data sync between platforms. It introduced custom coded actions into workflows, which, if you have a dev on your team, allows you to do all kinds of stuff.
Hmm.
It's also got an app ecosystem that is growing super rapidly,
Right.
and there's a lot of features that are you can just tack on to HubSpot. A lot of those apps are free, or at least have a free version. So I think as your company grows, you can do more and more with the platform.
Hmm.
Um, One that comes up all the time, and this isn't terribly ABM related. It's more sales, but is CPQ. People that love Salesforce are like, oh, I could never use HubSpot because you can't do CPQ.
Right.
Um, and that is just no longer true. There's a variety of different ways that you can achieve that, whether um, it is using a third party app. I did a webinar with a company called Squid, SKUID, that showed how you can basically use their app on top of HubSpot to build CPQ. Their HubSpot just introduced a beta for CRM cards that allows you to create CPQ as a CRM card, and you can do it directly on the deal record. So the options for extending HubSpot, scaling with HubSpot, are growing every single year. I don't think there's any other platform that is introducing features as quickly and scaling up to enterprise as quickly as HubSpot.
I was
Yeah,
going to
no worries.
ask about custom objects. I think you referred to it a couple of times, right? So what are some use cases that you implement right through custom objects? I know custom fields, and we use it extensively in our own CRM. But I'm interested. I'm curious about custom objects.
Yeah, how you use custom objects is really going to depend on your company, your industry. So obviously, Aptitude 8 is a professional services company uh, doing consulting. So some ways that we utilize it are we have our um, we have two different types of engagements we do, which are projects and retainers.
Right.
Retainers is obviously like a monthly ongoing situation where a project has like a set objective, start date and end date, that kind of thing. So we will create custom object records for every project, every retainer, and those will store things like the project team who is on it.
Hmm.
Project team is actually a separate custom object that we have as well.
Oh, okay.
Um, so we are associating those things together. So we have, if you think about the when a company comes through our marketing and sales process, a deal is created that's associated with the company and the contact. When that deal closes and it turns into a project, we will associate the project to that company and that deal. And then when we kick off and a delivery team is assigned, we will associate the delivery team there. And then we've got some, fancy custom coded workflows that will actually associate the members of the delivery team, the contact records to that company as well. And then we're
Interesting.
using the association labels to denote
Hmm.
who's an employee, who is, say the HubSpot sales rep that brought them to us, who on our team is actually working the project as a project lead or an associate. So that's one example that's specific to professional services.
Hmm.
I also just worked on a video which should be out shortly, later this week. Um, it'll be out by the time this podcast comes out. That goes over how you can build a data model with custom objects for a PLG company.
Hmm. Interesting.
So with product led growth, your goal is obviously to get people to sign up for a free trial, and then hopefully by using that free trial, you convert them to a paid customer.
Hmm.
So we've built custom objects for free trial accounts and full app accounts,
Okay.
and then you can store product data on those records. So if you have your product integrated with HubSpot, or if it's a web app, you can just use the HubSpot tracking code. You can actually get activity into those records, and you can see when
Hmm.
people have logged in. You can
Hmm.
see what features they're using, that kind of thing. And then you can trigger automation off of that stuff.
Hmm.
So if you have an onboarding plan, you can email them when they sign up, when the free trial object record is created,
Hmm.
when they use certain objects or certain features within your product. You can shoot them an email saying like, how was your experience with this? Or I saw you use this feature. The next step would be to use this other feature. And you can draw them into that free trial in a way where they're going to get a lot more out of it than if
Hmm.
you just like let them play around on their own.
Hmm. Very interesting. I'm going to check this out. Looks like I think you sort of create views based on the basic core entities and then create and extend, right? So HubSpot features through custom objects. And I think you talked about the example where how your team sort of engages with your client. And I was thinking that the vendor management or a partner management can be achieved through custom objects, right?
Absolutely. Partner management is a huge one. There's a company called Reveal
Hmm.
that is really pushing boundaries in the partnership space, and we have done some work with them to basically turn partnerships into a custom object in HubSpot, and then we are working on like a commission structure.
Got it.
So you're making sure that when your partners are bringing you in on a deal, then they are actually getting you can see on the partnership record, like the total amount of commissions they've got across all of the deals that they've brought in, that kind of thing.
Great. Ryan, I think it's top of hour and we covered a bunch of things, right? We started with RevOps, then we talked a lot about HubSpot, ABM, everything in between. Thank you so much again. Thanks for your time. Any parting thoughts, any comments that you have?
No, just thank you for having me. This has been a blast. I haven't gotten to really like dig into ABM in a while
Hmm.
since I was working at my last company. So this was like a nice little flashback.
Very nice. Thank you.